All right, well, what we're going to do today is find out how a steam locomotive works. Engine number 8 is a very simple steam engine. So you're boiling water and making the steam and putting it to work. But there's a lot more involved in it. So what we're going to do is take a walk down to the end of the locomotive and then more or less imagine this. They say the steam engine is the most human of all machines. So we're going to more or less look at our steam engine as a machine for this tour. So when a steam locomotive is operating, we can think of it as going on a hike, right?
Right.
If you're going on a hike, what do you need to bring with you?
You got to bring water and food and basically supplies for surviving.
Exactly, depending on how far you're going to go.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
If you are walking around the block, you probably don't need much more than your keys.
True, yeah. Yep.
If you're going a little bit longer, you need to bring some water because you might get thirsty. And if you're going, once again, longer, you're going to bring some food, you're going to bring some more tools. You're going to bring maybe a shovel, a sleeping bag, a tent, depending once again how long you're going to go.
Exactly.
So therefore, the bigger tenders on the bigger locomotives extend the range of where that locomotive is expected to go. Engine number 8 is a rather small locomotive. It wasn't expected to go very far or very fast. So this carries the basics, like we were saying, something to drink. In the tender, called the water. I sometimes call this the backpack. The railroad term is the tender. We also have a window there. You can see coal. The coal started to break down into dust, so that's why we put a sign on there saying coal. And sometimes we actually had a light in there, but I guess the light's burned out now. But anyway, those are the two basic elements that a steam engine needs to extend its range, and the tender allows it to do that. And 2 men are in charge of making sure this locomotive is ready to go. We see the fireman over here with the shovel. Already has some coal on that shovel. And his job is not only to shovel coal, but that's one of the basic things. So we'll follow the shovel from right now, from the tender into the firebox. All right, so we have the coal burning away, sitting on the finger grates. The finger grates can be shaken from time to time because as you're burning out any fuel, the ash can build up to the point where it suffocates the flame. So therefore, you have to get rid of some of that ash. It goes into an ash pan, which is kind of hidden by things. But anyway, you also have to have water. So he has, as well as the engineer has, an injector like this. And that will take the water from the tender and put it into the boiler. Now everything is kind of color-coded, so they're not just colors made up for no reason. Any place you see red, that means something has been removed. There's a cut made. The blue, the 2 shades of blue indicates water. This would be hot water. And here we have ambient temperature or cold water. We also have yellow to indicate heat, white to indicate steam, and of course black for the rest of the engine, because most steam engines were black. So anyway, you're getting water in, you're getting coal in, you're managing how the fire is burning, how much water is boiling, what pressure it's at. There are gauges inside the tent, the cab, so the engineer and the fireman can both see those gauges telling them how much pressure there is. There's also water sight glass, where the water level bounces up and down as you're in motion, but you can kind of get a good average about how high the water is. The water has to be at least a ½ foot above the crown sheet, so that's the topmost part of where the combustion chamber is. All this heat goes straight up, doesn't it?
Yes.
All right. Because it's going straight up, you unfortunately don't have an unlimited amount of sky above you. So what you have to do is now, in the early days of railroading, they realized this as well. There could be tunnels, there could be buildings, there could be low bridges, there could be tree branches, limiting the access of where that tall boiler might want to send the heat, so it actually had the heat go straight through the boiler through fire tubes. These long skinny pipes exhausting the hot gases, smoke, and whatever else is produced by the burning of coal out the smokestack. In the meantime, the water gets hot. That cold water, you might want to get a closer view of the injector. I know it's going to be a lot of back and forth walking. In the injector, you can see a lot of color going on there. The cold water meets up with a little bit of the steam and starts to preheat the preheating process, of getting the water into the boiler. Now, because it's such a small area, the Venturi effect comes in, and the vacuum will suck away the water and will just pull it out. So you don't have to have anything that pumps the water. That steam is actually creating the suction that pulls it forward.
Okay, wow.
All right? A lot of sophisticated stuff going on here for such a basic, simple locomotive. Now it's already preheated, so you don't have to follow it through the boiler, the pipe here. Preheated water going in through the check valve. Now check valve is almost like a tap like you'd have turning on and off the water in a sink or a faucet. And this goes up and down, but it gets pushed down because if it was just sending the water in, water wants to find its even point. So if you just had a way of getting the water in without that check valve, the water will also leave the boiler. So that check valve is very important to keep the water where it needs to be inside the boiler. Now we have the heat going through the fire tubes, we have the water being heated by it, and of course at a certain point of temperature, the water turns into steam. The evaporation point of water on a stove is 212 degrees Fahrenheit. I know you can talk about Celsius, but I like to talk about Fahrenheit because it's easier for me. It's what I grew
Yeah,
up
same,
with.
yeah.
All right. Now this is actually pressure vessel, so the water is actually hotter when it turns into steam. So that's a neighborhood of 360 degrees. When you pressurize water, it's actually cooling it off. So therefore, it actually boils at a higher temperature than water on a stove. 380 degrees, amped up to about 400 degrees, it collects in the highest point of the boiler in the steam dome, and it builds up pressure. By pushing more and more and more steam bits into that tiny space, it's like having a big party with a small apartment or a small house. More people keep inviting themselves in, they keep crushing each other, they're stepping on each other, they're breaking the furniture, they're spilling the drinks and whatever else, and as a result of that, the hostess of that party needs to get rid of some of those extra unwanted guests. And that's where the safety valve comes into play. You can't see it too well, but it's a brass knob on top of the steam dome, and that will release any extra energy. This engine operates at 180 pounds per square inch, and that's right around the point where they have to get rid of the extra energy. Because sometimes the engine has to have, well actually all the times, the engine has to have that power produced. You don't always have a place to go with it. So it's still making steam when you're standing still. But it's better to make steam when you're in motion because you're sending that steam to work. But if you don't have any place to put it to work, it's leaving the boiler. It becomes part of the atmosphere. That's one of the flaws of steam engines. But anyway, I'm digressing.
I have one question, excuse me, which I probably am putting the cart before the horse. What does that sand dome do up there? You're probably about ready to get to that?
Later on, but yeah, that
Oh,
will
okay,
actually
all right.
allow you to keep the train moving when the track conditions change. Because if you look at where the wheel and the rail meet each other, it's pretty much about the point of contact, a little bit bigger than a fingertip, maybe about the size of a dime. So this engine, with its drive wheels, is sitting on 6 dimes. So that means that there's very little holding it back. But when something comes between the wheel and the rails, like a light rain, frost, leaves fall on the rails, they singe and leave a little bit of collagen, that can cause the wheels to spin. Snow can do it. Anything that can get between the wheels and the rails can cause those wheels to spin. The adhesion of the boiler is overcome by nothing, practically nothing. So therefore, if you're reading the rails, a good engineer knows how to read his rails, and he will apply a little bit of sand from the sand dome to a pipe that goes underneath the wheels. It's kind of obscured by all the apparatus here. There's another pipe down here toward the back. Now, if the engine was backing up, this will leak. It's not, well, mostly you're not supposed to hit the wheels, it's supposed to hit the rails. This one's kind of bent a little bit outward. But anyway, that will put a fine mist of sand on there, so if the engine's going this way, the wheels will keep moving. It has a grip on the rail. It bites into it a bit.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, now while we're here, we might as well look inside that cut in the steam dome. So what you see, that looks like a plunger sitting inside there. That is actually the throttle valve, or sometimes I've heard it called the spool valve. So when the engineer pulls on the silver lever up there called the throttle lever, he's applying that to open up and set all that steam to work by going through the dry pipe, which is listed as a steam pipe here. Same steam pressure that's in the steam dome is going through the steam pipe. This particular engine operates at 180 pounds per square inch, but it could be any number based on how they design the engine. It comes through the manifold that sends the steam down a pipe like this, on this side and on that side. And there's a cut in there to show you that steam is going through. Then it goes into this, the casting that holds the cylinders in place. I'm drawing a blank on its term right now, but it will send it up to the valve. But right now this engine happens to be neutral, so the valve is centered. And therefore it's kind of complicated to understand the flow of the steam. But let's move it over just a little bit with our minds. The steam will come in this way and then it's come down this way. Once the steam reaches the cylinder, that steam that's been compressed now gets a chance to expand. And it cools off a little bit. And it pushes the piston this direction in the cylinder. The piston is connected to the piston rod, which comes this way. Connected to the crosshead, which also comes this way. Which is connected to the main drive rod, which also comes this way. Grabbing onto, in this engine, the third of the drive wheels, making it move a half a turn. In addition to the fact that everything is connected, you have the eccentric crank, the eccentric rod, leading up to the valve links, leading to the repositioning of the valve so the next burst of steam is in this direction, and that completes the cycle of the piston being pushed back and forth by the steam. Now, if the steam piston is going this way, that means that the steam that was on this side gets exhausted through the center, through the petticoat, and out the smokestack. And that actually creates more of a draft. So the engine becomes more fuel efficient by making more heat, pulling more heat from the firebox, heating up the water a little bit hotter while it's in motion than if it's standing still. This is a continuous process. The valve and the piston keep going like this. Now you can actually, once you're in motion, you don't need to have the full travel of the valve. You can actually set it more toward the center, so it's going a smaller distance. Instead of the full distance, you can regulate how much steam now is going into the piston once it's in motion. But the tough part is getting it to move. Not just to move itself, but to move the entire train that you have behind you. All right, now that we already followed the wheel to the point where it's going halfway. So when you're completing the cycle by the pistons going back and forth, this wheel, which we call the main drive wheel, is connected to the other drive wheels through these side rods. So I like to say it's like the older brother in a family of 3 brothers. Or maybe a very convincing older sister. Now the adults could be all theoretically the same size, but because they've got that family bond of the side rods, they're moving in unison. The older one has ways of getting the younger ones to work with him. Doesn't always work that way when you're the youngest child, but
True.
This is a way of looking at it as being a family of wheels in the most human of all machines. That is basically how it starts and ends, but we can go more into detail. I may have missed a few things. If you have anything to ask before I go on, we can. Because I can get more complicated. I'll show you in a few seconds.
So like when the steam engine's going like full blast and they can like release the most amount of steam going down the tracks, what all do they do? Where all does the steam come out of this, the main steam? Like when you see the white smoke come out, does it come mainly out of the steam dome?
Nope. Good question. Very good question. Because we're drafting the smoke out, we're also drafting the steam out. So smoke is coming through the fire tubes, the steam is coming through the petticoat.
Okay.
So they're combining with each other. And that's why you'll see the whiter smoke, because it's mostly steam coming out, plus a hotter fire. Darker smoke means the coal isn't burning as thoroughly, so you're getting a lot more dust particles going through there rather than actual heat. Okay?
All right.
Now, when it was saying we could get more complicated, one of the things that they learned in the early development of steam engines, they knew how a piston could work. James Watt decided how that would work in the 1700s. The first steam engines were not for locomotives, they weren't for boats, they were for pumping water from one part of the River Thames in England to get the fresher water into London and then putting the refuse downstream. He had a way of having the steam push the piston up and then they pour cold water on it to drop it down. Very inefficient, partly because the machinery wasn't in place for the piston to be the right size as the cylinder. So that was perfected a few years later. But once they found out how a piston works, they also found their flaws in it. And a piston, especially if it's going side by side or an angle, or even if it's going up and down, it will find a natural center once you bring it to a stop. What that means is that, let's say the piston gets centered like this, all the steam on this side or that side, it doesn't want to move. In the early days of railroading, that wasn't a big deal. You get a sledgehammer, you hit the casting, and it shakes it and starts moving again. But by the time this engine came along in 1923, that casting was too big. A sledgehammer's not going to have any effect on it. But they already overcame that many years before that by putting in quartering of the wheels, the pistons, and everything else. So while this one is halfway through, that one is a quarter of a way through, one side or the other. I've lost track of which way it is. But that means that these rods and this main drive rod is coming up at an angle almost to the top of the wheel. So let's say this is in the 12 o'clock position. When we walk around to the other side, we're going to see it's in a different position. Follow me. And if everything was perfect, it will be 90 degrees off of that. All right, you see a difference? That piston rod is much further out, right?
Yeah.
This main drive rod is in a straight line. So this is now at the 3 o'clock position. That one's at 12, this one's at 3, so they are a quarter of a turn. And because the wheels are connected by the axles, they're firmly bonded, they cannot be, they more or less are helping each other along. So the pistons cannot be centered. One of them is centered, but one is already off center. And they're working together, making sure that there is no stalling out of the pistons when it comes to a stop. The engineer sets whether it's going forward or backward by the Johnson bar, which I believe is called the reverser lever. By sending it forward, the engine first burst of steam is going to make it go forward. Right now I think it's in neutral, so if he sets it backward, it will be setting it to go in reverse. Because an engine has to go both ways. The track only allows it to go forward or backward. And the track tells it where to go. In very basic terms, that's how a steam engine works.
One last quick question. How much coal, like, does it take to get the fire going super hot, and then how much does it take to get it to maintain it to, I mean, I guess obviously it would depend on the size of the steam engine train, but for this.
And the firemen.
And the firemen.
It's a very imperfect science.
Is it?
I'm sure there's a way you can come up with the ideal situation. There's tests you can take. And the railroads were actually ahead of the game. They knew how to get things done, but they didn't know the science behind it. So right around the 1880s, they were actually having people work and trying to find the perfect scientific measurement